Okay, so this time let's see if we can do this head-to-head whilst doing the lap. So sat now again, wait for that car to pass. Okay, so this time let's see if we can drive and feedback what the experience is like in VR. So this is the Assetto Corsa. We're sat in the pits, Imola. I'm looking around because this is the second round. So thank you again to everybody who watched the first head-to-head and gave their feedback. Those that hit like, thank you very much. Those that hit subscribe, thank you even more so. And then those who commented and interacted, I can't thank you enough. The feedback was overwhelming, and we'll get to that in a second. And well, let's get to it now. So again, no dragging it out. So hashtag spoiler, I said that Assetto Corsa won between Assetto Corsa Competizione and rFactor 2. rFactor 2 won on force feedback, and ACC won on audio, and Assetto Corsa won on the absolute glorious visuals that we have. And I'm sitting here and in the pits before we even move. I'm drinking it in so that when we compare to, and this was the feedback, why didn't you do this in the first instance, Automobilista 2, I've got a good reference point. So I'm looking now a little bit more at what we see in the cockpit. That wheel is just beautiful. The definition, I want to reach out and just touch it. Every single piece of detail on there looks as though it's real. So I can clearly read everything that is on the dash. The white on black has that kind of like shadowy hue that you get when there's like a high contrast between white and black. That's to be expected. The only detail on something physical that has a little bit of a fuzzy edge to it is around all of the soft buttons that are on the sides of the wheel. The gloves look as though as real as the gloves I am wearing. So I can't necessarily say the same for the driver's suit because it's hard to look down and see that, but the gloves, the level of detail, I'm going to look at it, the level of detail in those gloves is phenomenal. It looks as though if you were to run your finger across it, as you ran your finger across the thread, you would see the shadows. The same way when you go across the pile on the carpet and you push it one way and it stands up, you put it back the other, it looks as though it has that texture to it. Similarly with the seats, I'm looking and I'm just trying to see that the head support has that look of fatigue that you get from friction, where it's being worn down and polished slightly. I'm looking at the door handle, the door strap, the push release. Everything looks really, really good, really crisp, really clean. The center pedestal, it looks phenomenal. Looking down into the footwell, the detail is fantastic. Now what I will say is it does look more CGI than metals and composites, so you can tell that it's inside a simulation. It doesn't dispel that sense, and that's probably because metals and stuff are harder to do. But the doors look fantastic. Now where it looks as real life is the window. So the window, when I look at the window and as the light is bathing the window looks as though water has smeared. You've driven along, you know when you've driven along a motorway and you've got that greasy smear that the water leaves because of the rubber on the road, but also the diesel on the road. That's how the windows look. And the sun coming through the clouds, like we spoke about in the first video, looks phenomenal. So I just wanted to call that out. So as we leave in the pits, again, the shadows as they dance across the window, they just look brilliant. The flickers as you drive in and out of the rays of light and the shadows, and how they dance across the windscreen, that dances across the dash. And I'm paying particular attention to how that lighting effect comes into the car. So what I will say is that grass there at the apex it doesn't look real, it looks like it's turf. So to be fair, it looks like it's turf. Good quality turf, but it looks like it's turf. Lighting is just unreal. It's almost real. So I'm driving, but I'm looking out my peripheral vision to see how the lighting is coming into the cabin and how it's dancing off the driver's legs, how it's dancing off the underside of the roof. So the lap is going to be pretty shocking. I'm not really looking for a lap in, well, I'm going to do a lap in anger and I'm going to shut up and just drive it, but I'm not necessarily looking for a phenomenal time. I'm looking to see how the three sensors that I spoke about come together. Now, the force feedback, again, it feels balanced. It feels like the front and the rear are connected. It feels like I've got big GT tyres on. I haven't driven anything with big GT tyres, but it just feels that way. You get that no force feedback feel when you go to a karting track and the tyres are cold and you remember that you've been spoiled and pampered your entire driving life since the early 90s, late 80s with power steering. But the surface of the road looks great as well. So you've got that sheen as the sun glints off it. There's different textures to it, from the apex out to the crown and then across the crown to the other side of the track. Again, I won't go into it again in just as much detail as I did in the first video, but the modding community have done an absolutely fantastic job of keeping this title, which is, what is it, 2014 title, feeling current. And the force feedback helps, it does feel that. So it really does give a nice rounded and immersive sensation in VR. So one of the things that I was told to reference in the first video's feedback was the mirrors. And yeah, you can look in the mirrors, and as you position yourself and move around to try and get a different perspective in the mirrors, it does change. Something that iRacing did, and it blew my mind when it did it, and something that unfortunately R-Factor does not. But again, looks amazing, feels amazing. The sound, I still say that the sound, but maybe it's this mod. So the reason I chose the 911 is because the 911 has such a distinctive banshee demon coming out of hell sound that truly splits the eardrums in the most beautiful way for a petrol head. And I have to say that in this particular mod, there's an apex over there, but in this particular mod, the car sounds as though it's been shortchanged. It doesn't have that same ear-splitting roar that, whilst it's not in this showdown, but the RSR in iRacing, when it was released, that was what stood out. It screamed, "I am here," and you were like, oh my god, the audio files that they put together for that engine sound just like watching Road to Le Mans. But anyway, Assetto Corsa is laying down the comparison lap again here, Imola. Let's jump in to Assetto Corsa Competizione, and then we will jump in Automobilista 2. Okay, so here we are, Assetto Corsa Competizione, sitting in the pit lane, Imola, And before we move off, just gonna take a look around. We're sitting in the 911. Let's take care of some of the feedback from the first video. So moving around to see whether or not the mirror gives us that 3D effect and changes our perspective, and it does not. Neither the rear view mirror nor any of the wing mirrors. So no, that's definitely not good. Doesn't help in VR, because that was one of the things I noticed when I first jumped into VR in iRacing. Was I was really impressed with the fact that you could get the benefit of being in VR, being in the car, and actually get a different view in the mirror by moving just like you would in real life to see into those blind spots. So thank you again to the person, and I can't remember the name, but I will tag it in the comments, who pointed out, don't forget the mirrors. You didn't reference the mirrors, and the fact that the mirrors in Assetto Corsa do that, and that the mirrors in Automobilista 2 do that. So that was first. Now again, before we drive off, I'm just going to pay a little bit more attention to the detail in the car. So what I'm going to say that stands out, again, now caveat this with, I'm quite sure that if we were in 2D and we could take full advantage of the Unreal Engine, that visually all the feedback would be different. But I'm looking at the wheel and the definition is not quite there. Now perhaps I haven't been able to turn up the quality settings enough to get there. So the wheel, if I get close to it, the wheel has a slight fuzzy resolution on it. So I can read everything on the wheel, all the buttons, they're already clear. And where you've got the traction control and the TCR, that's really clear, and the contrast between the white and the background and on that is really clear. But the inner shadow on that's in each of those little recesses is a bit fuzzy. When I look at the dash, I can read it, so I should say quite clearly I can read it. But where you've got again the TCR air, that's set to 6, and the TCC set to 6, that's got again black on white on black, fuzzy around the white, but again that's just a contrast thing. But also around the red and the green, and again the inside shadow. Let's not even talk about the ABS. The ABS, the A, B and S is blurry. It's blurry in there, and everything on the wheel, it just has a lack of sharpness. Now the dash has texture. I can see the texture, so it feels as though you could, if I took my glove off or actually left the glove off, I could run my finger along the Alcantara and get friction. It looks really, really good. The glove, I can't see because I'm in a shadow, so I'll have to wait until we're out of a shadow. The detail on the glove looks really good. Whether or not the textures on the glove match that of the dash. The center pedestal, see now the center pedestal looks fake, so it looks like it's in a game. So the quality is good, the resolution is good, and maybe I need to go and see some onboards of the 911 in real life on YouTube. The Porsche Motorsport badge looks good. So the detail looks good, and the contrast between the white and the grey is much better. It just looks like it's plastic and plasticky. But again, I'm nitpicking. The colour is a little dull, but maybe that's because we're in a shadow. So let's get out the pits, get out on track. But I just wanted to go over that, and it's good again that Assetto Corsa Competizione modelled the entire interior of the car and bit of the car. As I've mentioned before, I hate the games that did it as an afterthought, and you know they did. Rally 2, where there's no rear to the car, there's just a wall. It's just. Now listen to that. There are so many different sounds going on there. just playing with the turbo. And like I said in the first video, tactile, audio, visual, it all has to come together. So let's get out on track, get out of that shadow and see what it looks like in the car. So straight away again, audio just screams out that it's the strong point. So the colours, they did look a little bit washed out in the first video. I'll be less critical. They're fine. They at least don't have that over-saturated look that Assetto Corsa can have on some tracks. Sorry, Assetto Corsa. R-Factor 2 can have on some tracks, because that's really where it's showing its age. So the greens look green, the greens look closer to reality, whether it's the grass, which does reflect the colour of actual grass, or the safety barrier walls, or the trees. But it lacks a level of realism. It doesn't drag me in to make me think they're real trees. Something about the lighting. So the shadows, as you can see, maybe against the graphics setting that I've got set, you can see as the trees become rendered and the graphics become rendered on them. But it's not coming into the car. So as we drive past the trees and the shadows, maybe they're not reaching across the track and that's why, but they're not dancing across the front windscreen, they're not dancing across the dash, they're not coming into the car. So on an audio level, I'm there, it's dragging me in. And the reverb, let's get up against the wall. But here, again, so under the shadows, they're not coming across the windscreen. They're not dancing across my line of sight to make me almost squint as you would in real life. And from the force feedback, so one of the things that stood out to me in Assetto Corsa when it first came, well, Assetto Corsa Competizione when it first came out, and I could get on track once they introduced VR support, not to mention triple support, was compared to iRacing. It didn't matter what car it was, what track it was, whether I'd driven a lap, never driven a lap, I could get in and I could do the recce lap without spinning, because it felt like the car had rubber on the road. It aligned with what your senses were used to in the real world. You didn't need to be a high performance racer. Just driving, you knew what inertia felt like, what friction felt like, what gravity felt like. And Assetto Corsa Competizione, in its representation of tyres, gave you that. They felt like they were rubber, not grease blocks or steel or plastic. However, now, years on, and having spent the last year predominantly in R-Factor 2 and its amazing force feedback, whilst probably if I got back in and did laps in iRacing, I'd still have the same feedback for ACC. They now feel probably a little too soft, a little too spongy, and there's this disconnect feel that I spoke about in the first video, front to rear. Now it's ever more exacerbated in a rear-engined car that wants to go where it wants to go, rear first, but it just feels like it feels like fly-by-wire steering, that it's not mechanically collected to the front suspension geometry in any way. I turn like there, I turn, and it doesn't give me that feedback through the wheel. I don't get a sensation through the wheel that there's any sort of chatter as the tires scrub across the track. The car just rotates and it turns. Again, same. And I didn't probably recognize what that was when I was first doing laps in ACC. I was just taken aback by how you had to manage the tires, and I still love that, and how they at least felt like tires, and I still love that too. But I remember that it was unmistakable that you had to learn a different driving approach to driving the tires and driving the cars in ACC, and it's not the same as in R Factor 2 where you just drive, you don't think about it. So visually, again, I still would say that AC beats ACC, because the shadows aren't coming into the cockpit. Now again, maybe I need to go and boost the settings, but I haven't got them on Ultra because this is the first time in years I've been able to get ACC to run in VR. I just stopped trying because it was a hot mess until I went and basically spent God knows how many years worth of salary upgrading the PC. But so different track, different car, and at the moment it's the same feedback. Audio is what ACC wins on, not force feedback, and most definitely not visuals. The outcome would still be the same. So let's do this. Let's go jump into Automobilista 2. That's what you've all actually been waiting for. You might have skipped the video to get to that point. And let's do the lap in Automobilista 2 and then put them together and do the head-to-head-to-head, and I'll give the summary of what I think the outcome's going to be, but I think you already know. Okay, so here we are. Automobilista 2, what you've all been asking for. Sat in the 911 in the pits at Imola. And again, just like in Assetto Corsa and Assetto Corsa Competizione, before we go out, I'm just going to give my impressions of the visual experience, the audio experience, sat in the pits stationary. And so, full confession, this is not my first lap in Automobilista 2. So I do have my first impression blind reveal laps. That's at Bathurst, excuse me, and I'll put that together as a video as well. It's just mayhem, but it's glorious mayhem. So I already have some impressions, but this is different. This is another level, even to what I saw in that blind reveal. So sat here. Now I just that the lighting in the cockpit, sitting in the cabin, is unreal. It is next levels on Assetto Corsa. So we have the rays coming down into the pit lane. You can see all the shadows dancing as the atmosphere interferes with the light as it dances through the trees, through the fencing. But the shadows, as they're coming into the cockpit, you can see them dancing in the cockpit as well. The rays are coming into the cockpit, the light dancing off the driver's hands, and the detail, that little thumb twitch. So I know we get hand movement in Assetto Corsa Competizione, and it flicks the switches on the center pedestal, which is brilliant. It's amazing. But I didn't get the same sense of look at the features, the level of detail, the texturing in that glove. You definitely feel, if you were to rub your hand across it, that you would move the fibers, and you would see that shadow effect, and you could write your name in it. But equally, it feels as if you took the glove off, you would feel the textures in the glove. It's just amazing. The wheel, everything on the wheel is clear. So I'm looking for a bit of a haze. So the light is even making it feel as though I'm getting speculative rays, and I'm getting lens flare in VR. So in the VR goggles, I am getting some rainbow effect as the light comes through. but definitely in the cockpit I can see the lens flare too. But the texturing, and as the light and shadows move across the driver's arms, and I couldn't tell in AC and I couldn't tell really in ACC, but the detail extends to the driver's suit. And looking at the safety cell and looking at the harnessing, the side netting, that level of detail and texture extends. As I get closer, it looks like I could count the thread count on that. It's amazing. And in the mirrors, unlike in Assetto Corsa Competizione, we have that 3D effect where we can look in the mirror and we get what we would expect to see if we were looking in a mirror in real life. That push to release looks like it's metal, whereas in ACC the detail within the footwell looked really good, but you could tell it was a game. It was a really good, high quality, high definition, but it looked like a game. That looks like a fire extinguisher. That looks like a metal ring. That looks like fiber. Once we get out of the garage, we'll get a better idea of what the head support looks like, feels like, equally what the windows look like. But that ray coming into the cockpit, amazing. And the UI, superb, really clear, really crystal clear actually. So let me pop it up. Can't remember where it is. Nope, can't remember what the key binds were. I did them really, really quickly. Let's start. There we go. The UI is really clear, really good size. That audio. That audio is much better than it was in Assetto Corsa for the 911. But we don't have those turbo pops that we had in ACC. So let's... Oh, the light coming into the cockpit, as it's reflecting off the red garages, we're getting a bit of a red hue in here as well. And again, the shadows as they're dancing, they're coming into the cockpit, they're dancing across the survival cell, they're dancing across the dash. Outside the cockpit, that looks like grass. And the trees, it probably helps that they've got more autumnal trees or more autumnal grass. But it looks real. Oh wow. Whoops, I'm driving straight off the track because I was taken in by the lighting as we came through Villeneuve. So again, as we go through the shadow on the track, you get, as you'd expect, the same shadow coming into the cockpit. The sound sounds better, like I said, than the AC sound. Oops, I'm gonna miss, completely missed my turning point. But the lighting looks much better. It looks real. Again, it doesn't have the overly saturated effects that you get from R Factor 2. possibly as dark as ACC, but it looks real dark. It looks as though for the sun position, for the cloud cover, that it's not a bright summer's day. It looks as though it's it looks as though it's this time of year. It looks as though it's a January. It hasn't quite got into a winter wonderland type frozen landscape. It's more a back end of autumn, just as the seasons have been moving around. I'm not really doing a good lap. I don't want to crash, but I'm not doing a good lap because I'm talking and trying to drive, and I'm not really looking at the track and giving 100% to driving the car and looking around, taking it all in. And I get it. I completely understand why everybody that did comment said, how the hell have you done that head to head and you didn't invite Automobilista 2 to the party? And again, I apologise. It was only because I didn't own it. I'd heard so many good things about it, all the way back to the initial Project Cars platform it was built on, and how if you want to see what a game looks like, that's been built with VR in mind. Even that notification is really clear to read. It's seriously good how they've incorporated that. The force feedback is balanced. I don't know if it's as, what's the word, sophisticated as we've got from R Factor 2. It might be closer to a Codemasters force feedback compared to R Factor 2, or closer on the spectrum, which could be just above halfway. Doesn't mean it's bad, but I don't know if it's better, but it's easier to interpret what's coming back to you through the car than in Assetto Corsa Competizione. So here, running over the edge of the track, I felt that through the right hand tyres. As soon as I ran over it, I felt it. When I turn, I feel as though I've got weight on the front axle. I feel a one-to-one feedback on, I put in 10-degree steering. I can feel that the tyres and the wheels have taken that input and applying it to the track. Again, based on no setup work, no tyre warming. I don't know how much of it is setup, how much of it is physics, but this it's a very bad lap, so I will do a proper lap when I shut up. But this, as an overall experience, audio, visual, tactile, this definitely would be in the final with Assetto Corsa, and it would win. It just would. Assetto Corsa, I think, has better force feedback. I do think it has better force feedback. That's my initial thoughts, but that's just because I haven't spent enough time in this. I haven't tried various cars. I haven't tried to eke out performance. So I'm probably going off confirmation bias. But what I would say is, as an overall experience, this feels as though it was made for VR. It feels as though the developers respect the VR community. They don't care that it's a niche. They don't care that it doesn't yet have mass appeal. They don't care that that the epitome, the apex racers in esports wouldn't touch. I need to stop talking when I get up to very out and nail it, but it doesn't feel as though they have any disdain for VR. It feels like they said, we're going to make a game based on VR. We're going to make it the best sim racing experience possible. We're going to avoid that console feel, even if you can then play it on console. We're going to go AAA on the graphics. I haven't even spoken about one of the quality of life things they included that demonstrates they really did give it that level of diligence. But they also then went, we're going to make sure that the sound is right, or we're going to just make it the best VR experience. It's almost as though they created this as a proof of concept showpiece to try and get Kickstarter backing or venture capitalist backing to develop a VR product. Not just Automobilista 2, but peripherals as well. Because not only is the UI brilliant visually, but they incorporated visual response control. You just look at it, look at the control you want to select, wait a bit, and it will select it for you. So that same look to recenter that you get in Steam VR within the game, and it doesn't break the immersion because it's just the cursor. They haven't decided that they needed to put in a silhouetted VR controller. Yeah, I get it. So now I'm going to shut up and try and do a lap.